Not appropriate in the slightest. And it is something from a matter of scientific ethics and figuring out how to deal with those kinds of problems and questions that all of us who work in a scientific field, not just STEM, but in social sciences also, are going to have to figure out how to deal with, and probably pretty darn quickly. There's been a lot of talk about AI recently. And so I thought it would be relevant to do a little bit more into that and to talk about it with respect to STEM, to science more generally, and other things, because AI, as it were, is a product of STEM. Whether you like it or not, and where it's going, it is a product of STEM: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or the longer one, STEM with 2 M's, which you add medicine onto the end of it. But I digress. But I figured it would be important to dive into this a little bit, and I wanted to mention it also from the aspect of course, if you know Kieran White, he's been on this channel before, and the host of Crowdsource and the founder of Wokescreen. He is very adamant, of course, about the copyright issues with AI, and of course, the issues with AI and artwork and writing. And he actually prompted me in my thinking to go dive into this a little bit more. And I tend to agree with him. The use of AI for a lot of things that people would normally do is, to all practical benefits, to me, a way to cheat. Now, I digress a little bit here in that cheat if you're writing a whole manuscript with it or creating your images with it or all that kind of stuff, but as a tool to maybe help you out with grammatical issues, that could be a thing. And the reason I say that is because the universal language for science is either English or French. Sometimes you see articles in Spanish, but most of the time it's either English or French. Why? Because scientific practice is a global practice, so you're communicating with folks in other parts of the world when you write an article. And so it's imperative to be able to write in a common language. And for that reason, English is a difficult language grammatically. So it would make sense to me, well, have an AI helper to get the grammatical parts of English correct. Or French, or whatever language you're writing it. That would be an acceptable use of a tool for me. But in terms of writing a whole manuscript, or a whole book, or whole study, or anything like that, I would have a problem with it. So first, a little bit on AI itself. Artificial intelligence at a glance. This comes from Encyclopedia Britannica. Artificial intelligence is a computer's ability to do tasks commonly associated with human intelligence. The term is applied to the process of developing systems endowed with intellectual processes such as the ability to reason, discover meaning, analyze, or learn from past experience. Computers can carry out very complex tasks with great proficiency. However, despite advances in computer processing speed and memory capacity, as yet no programs can fully match human flexibility over wider domains or in tasks requiring much everyday knowledge. Such broad human-like intelligence is called artificial general intelligence or strong AI. Oh, shoot. Not what I meant to do. The earliest theoretical work on AI was done by British mathematician Alan Turing in the 1940s, and the first AI programs were developed in the early 1950s. With the steady growth of processing power and computer memory since then, in the early 21st century, AI has advanced to the point where programs can classify images, PreludeNet, master games such as chess, AlphaZero, carry on conversations, ChatGPT, and create an image from a text prompt, DALL-E. AI has proved helpful to humans in specific tasks such as medical diagnoses. I don't know that I want that myself, just a side note. Search engines, voice or handwriting recognition, and chatbots, in which it has attained performance levels of human experts and professionals. AI also comes with risks, including the potential for workers in some fields to lose their jobs as more tasks become automated. Yes, the economic side of things here is, of course, a concern. But the point to recognize with AI, though, is because AI is built off of a computer, It is entirely dependent upon what you give it. And here's actually the word right here that you see that I was going to go to next. While it's the idea that a computer could think and reason in the same capacity as a human, in reality is simply a model. And it is a model, because it is a model, rather, it is entirely dependent upon what you give it, or rather what it is trained on. So ChatGPT, for example, is a language model. That's how it can carry on a conversation, talking with you through the prompts. Basically, it scours the internet, learns all the different responses to different kinds of questions and what have you. And so when you type a question in, it tries to respond to that question, or it learns how it should respond based upon the other information, which is to say, if it's not something that it's been trained on, it doesn't have any imagination or creative ability to think outside of that, or rather to predict outside of that, because that's exactly what it is. It's a model. When you're doing stuff with modeling, any kind of modeling, you are training a model on something. And then based upon a prompt that it is given, you are predicting what the answer should be. It's not necessarily even thinking, as it were. In the analytics world, some of the types of artificial intelligence that one might use is called artificial neural networks for statistical analysis and modeling. It is a very similar kind of process. The idea is to have a model that tries to reason in a similar way, or reason in a similar way to the human brain. And there is something to that. But, of course, you have things like ChatGPT, Midjourney, other things like that, creating things based off of those prompts. You do have the questions of copyright, but for science, what is the concern with respect to science? Well, it is not the research itself per se, but the writing up of that research, or the creation of images. And that's where I want to go next with this. This is, oh goodness, there we go. This is the title of a published article. And there's something interesting about it here that you might notice. I have it zoomed in gigantically, so you can't see a whole bunch of things right now, but we will get to why that is in a moment. The title here is Cellular Functions of Spermatogonial Stem Cells Relation to JAK-STAT Signal Pathway. And this happens to be in a biology journal, as you can tell above. I think it's Frontiers in Developmental Biology, but we'll check that in a second because I have more links open related to this. Now, this is a STEM journal. This is a heavily analytic related paper, or at least it was, all those particular kinds of things. So the question, of course, is why am I bringing this up? Well, it wasn't too long ago that this was published, and it was even less time after that, that it came up in a realization that every single figure in the article was generated by AI. Now, to give some momentary background with this, for most of us STEM professionals and social scientists who need to generate images and figures, we're not going to AI to do it. We are using computer programming. Like, for example, for some statistical analysis, one might input their data and do some analysis via programs such as R, SAS, SPSS, Python, MATLAB, and a long list of others. And through those programs, you can also generate charts. Be it a map of something, be it a scatter plot of something, be it a bar plot of something, be it a box plot of something. You can generate all those things. That is all coming from computer programming, and increasingly, particularly for STEM scientists, but increasingly is the case that if you're a student nowadays going into a STEM discipline, you might as well do yourself a favor and get some good computer science and computer programming background, because you're gonna need it if you want to do any serious analysis in STEM. Otherwise, when you're talking about other kinds of images that might appear a figure, for example, say you want to present something on the organization of the figure of the paper. Sometimes papers can get long and complicated. So maybe you want a figure in there that's going to say, okay, we did this first, this first, this first, this in this order is how we did the study here. So the reader can spot it easily and be like, oh, okay, that's what they did. Or you need a diagram of something. Diagrams aren't necessarily easy to make with a programming language, but those other kinds of things you might use Illustrator or Photoshop, or even I have seen some people just use PowerPoint for this. They're not necessarily the best looking images, but it works for the purpose. But in this case, this was a situation where they used every single figure in this article was created with AI. And as it came out to be here, somewhat incomprehensible in terms of these things. Like, what the heck is that right here? Typos like crazy. What now is that? That doesn't seem right. Incomprehensible thing right there. Also incomprehensible right there, right there. Oh, okay, that's not right either. That kind of thing. Continues, actually. There's a lot more of it in here with spelling errors and things like that that do not make sense. And this is how you can tell it's wrong, because, of course, AI is trained on other things, right? So it was pulling something together that already had a huge spelling error in it. Likewise, I think there was one other image. Yes, here it is. This kind of thing. What now? I mean, you might have spelling errors abound on your own images. Might have been convincing if it had not been for the terrible spelling, because that's one of the ways you could pick up this was an AI image of a diagram, because, well, it spelled a whole crap ton of things wrong. Let's put it that way. Or it was putting it in multiple languages or something along that line. I don't know. But either way, it's not legit. And it was actually this person on Twitter who pointed it out, or now X if you prefer. Frontiers of Cellular and Developmental Biology. Yep, that's what that one was. And that was a STEM journal. And you can see right here. Yep, and you can see right here some of the other folks here in terms of who was involved in editing and reviewing. This I don't necessarily approve of, and there's a good reason I don't approve of that, because it's double-blind peer review is a good thing, because then you can eliminate biases associated with what you might think of the reviewer or the reviewers might think of the authors, but that's a whole that's a whole commentary for another day. But this was something interesting that happened, and so here too is the actual article, to which you can see the journal, in response to their credit, retracted the article because it was highly inappropriate. It is actually highly inappropriate to create AI images like that. Why? Because it's not your work in the slightest. It is not your work. And so here is what they had to say in the retraction notice. Retraction: cellular functions of the spermatogonal, I think I said it right, stem cells in relation to JAK-STAT signaling pathway. Again, this is Frontiers in Cellular and Developmental Biology, a STEM journal. Retraction notice. Following publication, concerns were raised regarding the nature of its AI-generated figures. The article does not meet the standards of editorial and scientific rigor for Frontiers in Cell and Developmental Biology. Therefore, the article has been retracted. This retraction was approved by Chief Executive Editor of Frontiers. Frontiers would like to thank the concerned readers who contacted us regarding the published article. So, and that's, if I go back here, you'll be able to see once I zoom out in a second. It is now slapped with a gigantic red retracted in there, because even in most cases, even if a publication is retracted, you can still find it on the internet and have a good look at it in here. And you can again see the same figures in here, where this was obviously misspelling errors to the nth degree that made it very obvious that there were problems with it to begin with. I don't know why. That is the next question, which I do believe this guy raised at one point, is how the hell did this get past peer review when there is that kind of a problem with these particular things here that just makes for some horrifically bad spelling errors, amongst other things. And these kinds of things here. So I will point that out with this. And this is an example of one of the concerns with AI in STEM in particular. Now let me go back here. And of course this will be linked in the description for you as always, but here's where I want to wrap this up. AI in STEM. What might it be good for? Well, there's a couple of things I can think of. And again, more so in terms of things that could be used to help the creatives themselves, i.e. the scientists, actually. Putting it in a similar term to the artists. And the copyright issues. But here's the things I think it could be useful for in STEM. And in science more generally. We're dealing with a world where there's big data. At this point, we're dealing with terabytes, if not petabytes of data, and I don't even know what the one above petabyte is. But we're dealing with a crap ton of data, and that is difficult to analyze. AI could ultimately be one of the most helpful things in the world for that, to assist with that kind of analysis. And perhaps even make it more accessible to do that kind of analysis, easier to do it. Okay. I already hit upon one other thing I think it could be useful for. I think it could be quite useful for grammatical issues, for checking on the grammar in a manuscript before you publish it, all this other kind of jazz, making sure if you, per se, because all these different journals have their own formatting and citation requirements and all this other kind of stuff, let's give an AI that and have it check a manuscript for, okay, did you put it in the right format for the manuscript or not before you submitted it? Perhaps a very useful thing because, let's be honest, we all waste our time. There's a lot of us who waste our time just doing edits for manuscripts and things like that, rather than actually being able to work on the research side of things with this. So the other note with that might be to polish up some figures. Not to create figures, which is what these guys did, and that was wrong, but to polish up some figures. Where I worry about it being used is the idea that not just the figures be created by AI, but the actual text of manuscript itself would be created here by AI. And I think there may be some ways to be able to pick that out in terms of contradictions made or language that doesn't make sense or spelling errors that, an author should not be making to begin with, those kinds of things. But, and also just because, an AI may not be privy to all the literature, depending on whether or not it's trained on all of it, and it may also pull in literature that's not completely related, to be honest, because keyword searches are definitely not perfect, and all that jazz, so you might be able to pick it out that way. But if you think about the ownership of the scientific process. I keep wanting to say creative process, but the ownership of the scientific process, let's think about this a little bit more. You do have, what do we do? You're doing the research. You're doing the analysis. You're setting up the experiment, set up experiment, do analysis, all that kind of jazz. One of the main things that you're doing, hopefully along the way, not just at the end of a project, but hopefully along the way, you're writing up a paper. Why? Because, well, you're supposed to be communicating your results to the world. You're supposed to be advancing the knowledge pursuit in your particular discipline, but also, sometimes your stuff does have societal relevance in a big way, and sometimes it's in a small way, like the Oreos paper from a while back. There's a way back on this channel if you can go find it. And so there's all those particular kinds of things. That bit of text that you write as a paper is the one last bit where you are expressing your own thoughts, and it is your own original work. And there are actually copyrights associated with journal articles too, well, most people don't know what this is, that many of the authors retain some of the copyright, but also so too do the journals who are publishing have the copyright, or may have the copyright. Sometimes it depends a little bit on the journal, and because we're talking about international, it can get complicated very quickly. But there are copyright issues there too. That's just crazy that you would give that to an AI to write the whole thing for it, not to edit, but to write it. That is not your original work. And then if you're doing that, and I would, if as a reviewer I could pick it out, or as somebody reading it after the fact I could pick it out, I would be pissed that you did that. To me, I would presume that a giant violation of scientific ethics, and scientific and editorial ethics, to have a whole paper that is written by AI. Now, to that end, I have talked with a few folks who are editors, and stuff like that has started to happen. Folks are submitting manuscripts that they can tell were written by ChatGPT or some kind of similar language model. Not appropriate in the slightest. And it is something from a matter of scientific ethics and figuring out how to deal with those kinds of problems and questions that all of us who work in a scientific field, not just STEM, but in social sciences also, are going to have to figure out how to deal with, and probably pretty darn quickly. So otherwise, we're going to have a whole lot of problems with paper mills just showing up because people are going to write random crap using AI and try to get it published, and it'll be all sorts of a mess. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way there, or comment the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. Stay curious.